So here we are in Axis Empires. This is the beginning of the winter, December 43, November, December 43, but going into 1944. So I'll call it Winter 44. Or Spring 44, or something like that. What happened? Well, the Japanese played the Migo offensive. This gives them blitz enabling, a couple of headquarters, some forces. Big thing that happened, though, they were able to start exerting pressure here on Lanzhou. And, you know, it looks like they're going to take all of China. For whatever that means, good or ill. That's going to be a pretty impressive feat of cheating and whatnot. Okay, over here in Europe, the Germans played an Axis partnership with Turkey. Now that put some pieces here into the delay box, in particular extra infantry unit and extra headquarters. And not as good as maybe they would have gotten off Italy, I don't know. But then they roll on the table on the card and they got an extra air unit. The question here was, did they want an air unit or did they want to increase the production of infantry? It's a hard choice. Production of infantry, it's about equally the amount of counters. The production of infantry would mean an extra infantry every season, whereas the air unit means, well, they get to recover it, so maybe every 3 months or so they get an extra air unit. Hard call there, but an air unit's a shift. An infantry is just a couple strength points, really. So it was there. Now, I put the no occupation marker here. I didn't look this up, but I think because the Russians are invading Turkey, that's in place. Turkey now will accept larger Axis units, and we've got one there actually in place, as well as this guy who might want to be moving into Turkey. He could, of course, break down to do so, but that weakens him. The Axis, now that it's winter and not mud anymore, proceeded to attack Minsk and actually did a pretty good number on it. The Russians decided to hold. They could have retreated, and they chose not to. There's no blitz marker or anything there. They also kind of filled things out here, and they've got headquarters is in play now. A lot more strategic power in terms of what they can do. Now, I should have a German headquarters down here somewhere. Oh, geez. I think under this Yugoslav unit. I didn't use this over in Britain. I think I'm doing a pretty good number on the Brits by constantly bombing London so they can't put reinforcements there, and then wiping this out. It was a bad idea, I think, for the Brits to kind of come down and play. They lost an armor unit because of it, which is something they can't really afford. The U.S. is in the war, but they don't have any troops here. They've got some stuff over in the Pacific, but they can't switch them between theaters. Some of the other games, WIF and Advanced Third Reich, allow you to shift between theaters. Advanced Third Reich, the real name is Global War for the combined Advanced Third Reich, Empire of the Rising Sun. Anyway, I guess we'll continue on with the other card plays. For the Allies, we have a couple of those really... There's a few of these in the game, these key cards where you could decide to go one way or another. Over in the Asian theater, they played the Arsenal of Democracy card, which I think is the historical concept. Building up on support units, it doesn't really change what you get in terms of support units, but everything's sort of as natural. If you take the other option, which I did in Europe, it's the U.S. Victory Program, you get more ground units. And you get more ground replacements. But in exchange, you pay a delay modifier. Your good stuff is going to be slower. So over in Asia, I didn't get all the possible infantry units I could have, for example. There are some decent infantry units that, if it looked like it was going to be a major ground war in Asia, if it didn't look like I was going to need support units more, well, then those would have been a choice to make. As it stands, though, it looks like I very much want to be fighting the island hopping campaign, at least for a long time. And to do that effectively, I'm going to need to keep my delay modifiers as low as possible. Speaking of the Asian side, you see a lot of counters here because of the U.S. Entry and the attack on the communist Chinese, some Japanese entry pieces, etc. But we also had a bit of a naval battle. There was an attempt, turned back, of course, at an invasion on, I don't remember what, I think over here, Majuro. As a matter of fact, had the Allies been able to do this right, they wouldn't have been intercepted, I think. Well, no, there's this port. Okay. Yeah, I think they're intercepted. I can't, it's hard to tell what works where, but they got intercepted, fought a naval battle, both are in there, no invasion happened. Over here in the West, well, the U.S. picked the opposite plan, the victory program, and that gives them more ground troops. But, and you can see the effects of all this, along with the Turks that are in the box now. But it also adds this victory program shit in here. Whee! It's like the 3D House of Horrors. And that's going to cause a lot of trouble in terms of, like, you know, maintaining a strategic bombing campaign or something like that. But with the situation in Britain, with the difficulty Germany's having on the ground, my feeling is that ground units are exactly what I want right now. I may end up having rued this decision at some point pretty soon, but we'll see. All right, I guess I'm on to the Soviets. Oh, one thing. So some U.S. units came in at Liverpool along with the Brits, and they drove the Germans back with support from the headquarters down there. So, you know, you're beginning to see the British Isles maybe showing their sign that they're going to get liberated completely. Those Germans are going to get knocked out of southern England for the most part, I think. But if they don't, I would suspect that this is probably a major German victory. You know, if they can hold the East Front steady and hold a foothold in England. All right, on to the Ruskies. Okay, for the Russians, they're able to play the Aid to China card, and most of the effects don't do anything. It's better than the no effect card, though. It does put the Soviet aid to China in the delay box. And actually, I'm going to cheat here a little bit in favor of the Allies and take their nationalist aid, which isn't doing any good at all, and dropping that into the delay box as well, in the hopes of bringing it back as a pro-Soviet aid, or pro-communist Chinese aid. Okay, over here in the Russian European side, we have the Red Army conspiracy. Now this is the card that's left after the picks that I made, the Chuchenkov, the purges not being made, whatever. And here's the cost for not having purges. Well, not a lot here. These are all good effects, right? The option card gives you the units that you were going to get and your replacement points, some of them. But the problem is you have to roll on this table here. And on this one I got a political option for the Axis, which enabled them to pull the Allied support, well, the Allied influence marker out of Spain. Not a major effect, but still something that you would rather not have seen happen as the Soviets. There's no real conflict between the Soviets and the Western Allies in this game. I think it's possible that they can fight, actually, but there's no reason for them to do so, and victory point-wise, there's no advantage. They're not struggling with one another. What they're doing is actually both trying to defeat the Axis, and if they succeed in that, they share a victory. If they fail in that, they share a defeat. There's no way to compare them at the end of the game, which I find a little saddening, given that it is really designed as a three-sided game. I can see where they wanted to get away from that side of things, though. All right, we'll push into 1944 now, and I didn't show you what happened with the Russians. Okay, so over here, they're continuing attrition attacks and beginning to have, a pretty heavy effect actually on the Germans. Knocked out another one of the big armor units, hit some infantry here and put a hole and did some casualties here. Mainly trade-offs, but the Russians can afford trade-offs. Alright, guess I'll come back in the next year. Axis January, February turn. Japanese sweep in and take almost all of Kansu at this point. They're ready to go into Xinjiang. Right now, they're 1 point short of dropping it up to the 4 level. Whether or not they can get there, whether or not they can freeze it there, essentially, with the mandate. That doesn't freeze the victory points, but it says, hey, I've got 4. You've got to match. You've got to beat that to have any chance of getting positive points on this map. Oh, and that might be very difficult in the situation and the extent of the Japanese victory there. But over here in Europe, the Germans continue to schlag on in their blitz siege, a term that came up due to my use of German units in WIF, actually. Always great on the attack, right? We got them, if I don't cheat, got them kind of punching through here near Moscow. But we saw them make these kind of maneuver before, and they got kind of hurt doing so. But they did take Minsk, and that's kind of big, actually. I think that may be pumping them, I don't know. I think they're a +3 total, so they've got a ways to go before they can get their own victory points up another level. Over in Britain, well, let's take a look at Turkey first. A little bit of maneuvering. They didn't manage to make an attack there, but in Britain, they regained the southern coastline. They gave up the beachhead, though, and are just using the shipping resources. Not sure why. Mainly to get the extra troops on board for defensive reasons, and because they're not planning on continuing to commit forces in. They don't really have convoys to ship more forces in, so they're kind of relying on those guys are either going to do it or they're not, and we know they're not. It's just a question of how much of a thorn they can be in this side of the Americans and the Brits, or if they're just a penalty for Germany in general. Okay, I guess we move on to the Allied players. Well, in the Pacific, Allies have moved around, gathered more forces here, hoping to get a breakthrough here at Rabaul, and then clear things up here. Kind of giving up on cutting both sides of the line. If they get this, well, this becomes quite open. In fact, the only danger there is, of course, the naval assets, which right now they're not really capable of handling. And the fact that the Japanese here get their assets back quicker, so it's kind of painful for that. But if the victory points can't be turned around, that ratio can't be changed. And large quantity of Allied units that start to accumulate can be, but yeah. Over here in Europe, we see something interesting. The Russians ended up having a supply failure. Now, previous supply failures, I think one of them I caught it, but then it didn't because of the way it's kind of swirled in the rules. And it's not hidden or anything, it's just my inability to understand things quickly. A support unit gets destroyed along with it. Before, they always seemed like a pretty minor thing. Now, what happens here, it's kind of weird the way the rules are set up for this. So that piece is handled, and this may be part of why this happened to me. Under failure, command supply, right? And this says, okay, here you get this marker, and then it goes into some instructions here, and at the end of each paragraph of the instructions, it talks about putting the supply unit, the support unit in the delay box. But for the most part, it looks like this is, hey, choose who gets to place your supply, your failure marker, and then under the marker itself, and it certainly shouldn't be there, but that's where you end up looking, or where I end up looking, after having been taught by this game, for the effects of things, after having been directed in one place to go here to this marker and find out what it does. The instructions are there, but it's kind of this weird, I know they don't want to write things twice, I understand that fully, but there's this weird situation where I'm missing the rule. It's kind of, kind of important, right? Based on this layout and formatting decision. Whereas in a normal rule set that wasn't trying to be so purist in one way or another, you would kind of say, hey, here's what's happening. Here's what happens in this case. This one might work out to be a pretty good reference, but the problem is, even with things squirreled away like that, I'm going to miss things using it as a reference because I skim. I don't read every single word. When I think I'm in an unimportant section that's telling me how to deploy something, and I think I understand that part, I'm going to go and I'm just looking for the reference for the part that I don't think I understand. Anyway, that caused the Russians to have to fall back. No requirement there, just they had a gaping hole in their line that they couldn't plug. And now they've been able to move and kind of form more of a line. Now this is kind of risky too. Moscow's in danger, I would say. Not sure Moscow matters terribly much. It's a capital, but I don't think capitals are that important from what I understand of the game. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I haven't found anything in the rules that seems to indicate that they mean much more than anything else. So I'm not even sure why they're designated as such. Anyway, we can see though that there was a counterattack here. They drove the Germans out, but they couldn't advance because they can't enter a zone of control. And they've fallen back here and, are really at risk. I'm kind of thinking it might make sense to pull back to the Dnieper line. But I still have a decent amount of troops. It's just a matter of, no matter what I put there, it's going to be kind of fragile. I've got a lot of headquarters up in the north now to try to cover this situation. Maybe not enough. We'll see. All right, I'm going to load this one up, make some rolls. There's still a few items in the delay boxes that need to be allocated.